Hello, everybody that's coming into our webcast today for Futureproofing Now. We have a topic that, all of our topics are great, but this one is extraordinarily great because it's not only the stuff that I do in my full-time job, technology, innovation, but it's also the stuff I spend an inordinate amount of time on in my rest of my life in terms of following sports. You throw me some tiddlywinks going on in Chile, and I'll probably chime in for at least half an hour late at night. And we've got three expert panelists today that are going to be able to wade and chime in on some of the future of sports, both technology, fanship, innovation, and I'm sure a few other things. I'd like to first introduce my co-host, Andrea Cates. Andrea, how are you?
Excited about the topic.
You say that. No, give me like your level of candor on this, because you are.
No, it really is it's a really universal. I mean, every single person has some connection to either being involved in a fitness activity themselves, watching someone else, talking about it, being, relating to a team. To me, it's really universal and it's global. So I really am super excited.
Excellent. All right. Well, good. I'm glad you came back just as forcefully the second time around. The play on words titling this webcast is intended. I think it was, I will go to my death saying it was a crime that Moneyball lost to the artist as in the Academy Awards about a decade ago. That should have never have happened. And we're modeling ourselves a little bit on that. I think the movie, if anything, was not a sports movie. It was about how to think differently about things. And I think we're thinking differently about how technology is changing the way our sports are either led, fanned, or played. And we're going to talk about the middle word of that today. Here we are, as we always are. I think this is about our 50th webcast episode, Andrew. So congrats on making it this far. I think the gentleman on the line will attest to the fact there are a lot of people that flame out early. We've at least stuck at it for 50 episodes. So. And I do want to say that the Masters is coming up this weekend. I know Yanke is probably going to be riveted to his TV being a golf impresario. But for me as a Canadian, Mark may identify with this, the Masters always represented spring for me. To hear Jim Nantz talk about the azaleas in full bloom, it's going to be really, really weird seeing the Masters in November. So, and the other thing, I guess, I was always late for Sunday dinner. Just because the Masters goes on forever, particularly if it's tight. I think it's dark by 6:30 in Georgia, so at least I know I will be getting to my Sunday dinner this week. Andrew, we talk about sports is life, life is sports. I borrowed this visual from a college game recently where I guess, certainly fans in college sports were bubbling up, but, talk to me about the metaphor between what we're talking about in this topic versus all of our other topics.
To me, the reason this is universal is we all fundamentally want a sense of belonging, and we all fundamentally want a sense of connection. And to me, the idea of sports and the idea of the way we live, they're really one and the same right now. We never thought we'd be working the way that we're working. We never thought that we'd be so excited about brands that we haven't been in their stores recently, but we're still excited about it. And to me, the notion of sports and being able to cheer for the home team and feeling a sense of connection and feeling a sense of competition and just, the excitement, it is literally the life force. So what I love about it is for every single company that we talk to and work with, we talk about needing to build a tribe. Well, sports do that naturally. You don't have to teach sports about that. We talk about the importance of digitalization. I remember the first time somebody explained Twitch to me, they had to explain like 3 times that I was going to watch someone else doing an esport. And I'm like, that's way too not going to happen, but it happened and it's huge. And, I've worked, as you know, for the NFL and with NASCAR and with a lot of other sports teams. And it's been amazing to realize that people have such a huge identity with the sports that they follow. And then it inspires us to live better lives and be more healthy. So I think it's literally every single thing that's been crazy about the pandemic has come out in sports and vice versa. And I think that we've learned from each other. So I think that this is, do we need escape? Yes. Do we need connection? Yes. Do we need to focus on health and wellness? Yes. And how does that all come out with the sense of being a fan? Because we do think it's related to being an employee and to being a customer.
And now tell us your true fanships here. You've lived in Houston and Pittsburgh and San Francisco. Do you have a sports team that you root for?
So yeah, I would say Philadelphia Phillies because I went there with my dad. We always went to baseball games, so it was kind of that old-fashioned sit with dad and have a hot dog feeling. That can never be taken away from me. Then I think the Ann Arbor Battling Wolverines because I went to a university that had 101,000 people in our stadium. First day on campus, I was passed from the front row all the way to the back, and we had people screaming. We lived about 3 blocks from the stadium, so every single game day it was, selling lemonade to fans and being a Wolverine, and I still follow them. And I think probably the other thing is that living in Oakland, so I feel like up until recently I thought that basketball was really a great thing in Oakland, and now it's in San Francisco. So I
I
secretly
don't think
followed
we
them.
have them anymore. So
So yeah.
I am, just so everybody knows, I'm a bit of a Seahawks fan, so I'm not going to get head here, but certainly I was disappointed by their loss to the Bills. Anyway, just some quick context in terms of setting up our topic, and then we'll introduce our esteemed panelists. Certainly, we're dealing in a pandemic right now, and there's been a 45% drop in revenue, and I'm not too sure if that leads to permanent fanship change. Esports has been doubling every 4 years, and with the notion of legalized gambling, at least in the US, if not Canada, what does that do in terms of our experience with the game? And is this maybe a canary in the coal mine in terms of people hungering for a deeper experience with the games they play? We usually produce a list of 30 technologies every decade. We're about to update this list, but if I look at every single one of these technologies, you can probably link it to sports somehow, and it would have their equivalent. I've thrown a few things up here just to get us to get the grist started, I guess. At the hands of any fan's fingertips is an enormous amount of sports data. Is this stuff we're hungering or not? I'm not too sure, but certainly anytime within game, there are people that are accessing things. This is sports data IO. The people that are commenting on sports, the three of us, the five of us, I guess, today, are part of this world of people that are commentating on things that may not work full-time for a broadcaster. And so the fantasy footballers, they have about 200,000 followers on Twitter. So it's like the actual following of a sport is actually a thing. The Athletic is just, it's a subscription-based sports journalist type of edition. It's just gone over 1 million followers. And so it suggests maybe there's a business model here in terms of just some type of subscription economy of journalism. I ran across Season Share, which was if you can't afford your season ticket, you can share it with people. And so has the sharing economy met our fanship? And actually, you can now do this in a coordinated fashion. Not too sure. We've seen, certainly I've seen with the rafts of young people putting filters and stuff on their cameras through AR. Maybe that's something that we'll talk about in today's discussion. And then there's something called Fan Cam here, where it's like you can pan into this massive arena. This would have been, I guess, Madison Square Garden, or maybe their outdoor game. And you can actually hone in on yourself. And so you can identify as an individual in the crowd, which is, I think, something we all want to do. So with no further ado, we'll introduce our panelists from Amsterdam, gracing us today. It's Jan Kees Mons. Hopefully I know we're talking beforehand, and the New York Yankees, where it's actually based on Dutch kind of background. So your name is personifying 2 continents today, I guess, Jan Kees. So you're a sport commentator, blogger for Sport Tomorrow, founder of JKM Consultancy, and pretty much your hand in a whole whackload of different sports, and giving us a European perspective today. So welcome, Jan Kees.
Thank you.
Rob Cressy, who just jumped off doing his own podcast and webcast to jump on ours. So this is, and I am quite envious of his baseball, and hopefully there's some hockey cards on his background wall. Podcaster, video host extraordinaire, does sports marketing huddle, Sharp 600, could be some other things I'm not aware of. We'll hear about them later. And also founder of Bacon Sports. Rob, welcome.
Thank you for having me. And oh, by the way, that podcast was about the Masters.
Oh, man. And what was the big takeaway?
It was about sports betting. The big takeaway is to identify the golfers that you want to fade in the tournament.
Operative word there being fade, I suppose. But yeah. Well, welcome, Rob. We may get into Masters discussion on this one today, too. And then Mark Silver, I had to get a fellow Canuck. Mark's being connected with most of the digital sponsorship properties of note in Canada. He's founder of something called Ready, Set, Go, and he is faculty of School at Business School. I always mispronounce that. I've also misspelled host, but you've got something called Backstage Podcast and partner in Stadium Digital. So the commonality of all of us is we have a lot of things going on in our lives, apparently. So Mark, welcome to the webcast.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Glad to be here. And as a Canadian, I'll say that the Masters happening this time of year, it's a nice consolation prize because of the cancellation of the Canadian Football League season. We would have been in playoffs right now.
Nice, holding on to that CFL, eh? It's
we got to. It's been good to me. 3
downs is still better than 4. I will say that.
The balls are bigger.
Andrea, we have dealt 50 ways different to Sunday on the pandemic. Do you want to kick our discussion off today in terms of fanship and the pandemic?
Yeah, so fanship in the pandemic. And a lot of this, of course, is experience, and a lot of it is technology. Because what we know is people have done things quicker than they ever thought possible, but they also took care of a lot of technical debt, things they knew they had to do. And they also experimented. Since they knew that the season was going to be completely different, possibly somewhat disastrous, people have been doing different things. And so from the fans' perspective, is this way of relating to sports temporary? Is it an interruption or a permanent reset? And I'll start with Jan Kees. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that, a couple of things on the fan. First of all, being at home means that you basically want to see sports wherever possible, and being a fan at home, there's only a few possibilities actually to see it. That's your TV and streaming. And of course, I've, for example, discovered streaming a lot more. I'm still from the old generation, and streaming for me is kind of new. So I think more generations will actually go that avenue. So it changes the way you watch sports. That's one of the things I actually see. Then secondly, I think technology for itself is becoming more important by being at home. You are basically going from technology. What it does do is it is accelerating using technology. I can see in the future, because I particularly look at the future, that you are basically watching your game at home and having a stadium experience by putting on a VR driven goggles or whatever you call it, and have at least a stadium experience, being a fan at your home. And even you can probably connect with other viewers who have the same experience, and then make buddies that way. That is something for the future, but it sets to think. The pandemic will probably accelerate trends like that. That's just a first remark. I'll think about a few more.
I think that's great to start off. Yeah, we can start off with these quick ones because there's lots of follow-up, and we'll be interested later in hearing what is it that a fan's really looking for. We're substituting X for Y, but what is it that they're looking for? So we'll come back to that as a topic. So let me go to Mark. Is this a temporary interruption or a permanent reset?
No, I think it's a temporary interruption. There's this concept of a fear of missing out that some generations, maybe not ours who are on this call or on this webcast, but some generations really live for. And I know here in Toronto where I am, there are properties like, in particular, like the TFC and the MLS. It's such a great environment. The price point is reasonable enough that people can just walk up and have a great experience, especially in the evening or on a afternoon during the summer. And that's gone right now. And while we all experienced, I didn't have up here in Canada, no one could attend sports. I know in the US you had some of that, but the bubbles that we saw, it just wasn't the same. And I think that the difference that from my experience here is sports teams in particular, separate from leagues, because leagues did a great job, obviously, with their OTT platforms, and broadcasters did a good job, and were able to stand up amazing productions like we've never seen before. But teams themselves were kind of left out of the loop. Very difficult to monetize your fan base without tickets or without the components of concession. So retail really doesn't move the needle as much. So I would say that organizations that made the investment ahead of time in some technologies, and they just happen to be Canadian technologies, but it's all around mobile interactivity. So a couple companies where I know the founders quite well. One is called Fanx, another is called Rover. Many US sports teams are using them. Those organizations that already made that investment to get closer to their fans, to know their fans, to not rely on social media and I'll say top of funnel awareness as their reach, but actually get to know that person. Those are the brands that got to stay relevant because they already had that base to keep engaged, even while schedules were changing day to day. COVID was breaking out in isolated instances. So that's what I see as kind of the stopgap. Teams in particular have got to be investing in knowing their fan base, engaging their fan base, and doing it in ways that don't necessarily earn them revenue today.
Well, that's a great place to start. And I'm going to keep building because, Rob, I'm going to ask you to just build on that. So what are some ways that you think this temporary interruption will remain in the permanent reset? What are some things that are going to stick because we discovered that they're actually cool and important ways to stay connected that will stay even after the temporary interruption's done?
Well, the number one is digital engagement, something that what we lost at times was the in-person experience. So one of the biggest challenges and opportunities is how do you take what is a phenomenal in-stadium, in-arena experience and now digitize it? So by design, we now have to be more digital. So one of the things is I see this more of an evolution because really we're always changing. If you've got a growth mindset, you've always got to be getting better. We're just more aware of it right now. So right now, the emphasis on digital, the teams, leagues, brands, companies that did not invest in digital before this, they're kind of screwed. But the ones who did, all of a sudden are going to put themselves in a position to succeed in the future. And I believe that very similar to what Mark said, the investment of building your community and getting to know your audience. Well, how are you going to do that? You need to do that via digital. So for me, I'm looking podcast, video, live streaming. What can you do to stand out and be different and find ways to engage that fan?
Super interesting. And last follow-up is any particular surprise that you saw in terms of a digital acceptance, Rob?
I mean, I think there is I don't know if I would call it a surprise, but there is a forced adoption. So I think this is actually the perfect example of this. We're all now using Zoom right now. And what that did is it accelerated the rate in which we can all communicate digitally. And I'm someone who, among other things, helps companies, brands, teams, leagues launch podcasts. But one of the biggest challenges I had always heard was, Rob, I've never been on camera. Rob, I've never been on microphone before. Well, guess what? Overnight, we all got on Zoom. And guess what? All you've got to do is push record. Congratulations. You're now a podcast host, a video host. You can live stream and you can webinar. But guess what? That accelerated things years for my business and so many in the industry because now this is commonplace. So we're used to this digital communication. And while I don't expect 100% of retention moving forward using Zoom, a larger percentage are going to continue to use it in the companies, teams, leagues that are forward thinking. They're going to say, well, wait a second, our connection points are so simple because who's to say we couldn't bring fans on this Zoom right now to talk with their favorite athlete?
Love that. So Sean, let's go to the next topic.
And I would say in deference, though, I mean, you could become a podcaster right away, but not with your voice, Rob. That voice, that microphone, come on. They would be pale shards of comparisons to that. So
I vote for Rob. Great voice.
All right, maybe we'll do this one in reverse order, guys. It's sometimes, one of my good friends said, in a crisis, it's really tough to take a long view. Like everything's just in front of you. It's like a veil and it's really tough to see past it. But, I heard Pfizer's coming out with a vaccine. Maybe we'll have a fast test or whatever. we will get to the other side of this. And so maybe if I extend the timeline a little bit, guys, let's talk about a decade. It's interesting. They've played a whole bunch of hockey games from the 1980s. And I'm like, was it that slow? And was there that much hooking and grabbing and roughing and fighting at a moment's impulse? I can't remember that, but it was. So we sometimes don't appreciate the amount of change that happens in the long term. Starting with you, Rob, like if I peer out to the next decade as far as a fan's concerned, what's the biggest thing they have in store for them? What's the thing that would get them most excited?
One word, personalization. So think about when you would go to a game, and I live down the street from the United Center in Chicago, and boom, I'm super excited to see the Blackhawks or the Bulls or whatever. And I scan my ticket, I go in there, and that's it. Like I have my own experience, and maybe they've got my email address or something, but there's really not a lot of connectivity between me and the team and the experience. Well, guess what? All of that is going to change, because if you're smart, back to what Mark said, you're going to want to personalize as much as you can within your community. Because, and I've heard this on podcasts that I've done before, the fan experience starts before the game. It's not just when I'm at the arena. So what can be done to make me, the fan, feel some sort of way about the team, the league, your sponsors, all in the name of elevating the experience? And oh, by the way, if I can't attend that event in person, how about you personalize that for me digitally? Because if we have so much opportunity for tracking or even opt-ins, because God forbid someone ever gives me something that I actually want to sign up for, where you're like, wow, this is incredible. That's what the new marketing is going to look like. It's no longer going to be spammy. It's going to be so personalized that you create these positive brand interactions that make me look forward to hearing from you again.
Imagine the Michael Jordan cam back in the day. Like you can see the game, and then you can see the Jordan cam if that's your level of personalization that you need, right? Interesting. All right, Mark, what about yourself? What are you seeing? What are the tea leaves saying for you?
Yeah, I'm gonna expand on what Rob was saying. I agree with a lot of it. I think there's one element that I'll just focus on at the beginning, and it's about privacy, and this world where we're going from being, and I said it before, it's got a top of funnel audience. We used to speak in terms of views and visitors. We're actually need to start speaking in terms of people, the people that we know, and we'll start with like an opt-in world, and we'll start with, because we don't know if people like can attend physically, maybe they don't live near the team that they cheer for, which is a phenomenon we already know about from European soccer and how they have fan clubs. So this concept of looking at lifetime value beyond tickets, in this industry, especially with the rise of technology, and there's so many great companies, not just to mention companies like Salesforce that have helped so many sports organizations understand their fans better, and then all of the, let's say, the ecosystem of technology and agency companies that move around that. But we need to get beyond the ticket, beyond the e-commerce. We need to get into creating a value that is within a subscription, that whether you can or can't go to the game, watch the stream or not, buy merchandise, have access to special, in this case, virtual meet and greets versus necessarily like having that hosted experience that you would have traditionally. Like it needs to be a basket of goods. There needs to be an exchange of value. And like Rob said, like personalized to me as that experience. I think that's fundamentally the way that we have to shift, because what we've learned so much in the pandemic, we cannot rely on broadcast television revenues, ticketing, and the concession part that go with that. There has to be an ongoing business model. And we've seen this in so many other industries already. I mean, we're not just going to talk about Amazon, and the Prime membership, which is a brilliant example of how, hundreds of millions of people, I think it's over 100 million at least, right, have said, yeah, I'm going to give you my money. I mean, this is beyond Costco, which we know, Sean, is incredibly popular in Canada. And so that's the wave that I'm riding, which is our relationship is going to change, and attending the game is not going to be as important as pledging our allegiance to the team. But the impetus is really going to change on delivering the content. From today, we're so reliant on broadcasters, but there's going to be a movement where the broadcasters, we're already seeing it. We saw ESPN laid off, 300 to 500 people last week. We are going to see a movement where the broadcasters cannot afford their business models. And if these leagues want to continue to earn that revenue from the consumer, they're going to have to take that responsibility upon themselves, which we've seen a lot in smaller leagues. And we've certainly seen in other parts of the world where like we saw the EPL was had the pay-per-view over the last few weeks before they pulled that back. But it has to shift. The revenue has got to get closer to the clubs. These layers that we've allowed to be inserted over time that have really propped up the value of these clubs and the wealth of the owners and the amount of money that players are getting paid, like there's going to need to be an adjustment. And getting direct to consumer, if we could throw a word at it, is part of that adjustment.
It's interesting. Adam Silver, I'm presuming no relation to you, Mark.
Unfortunately, no relation. I have slightly better haircut, but I like his glasses. I might change my glasses.
I love his comment though. He says, 1%, only 1% of our fans have ever stepped into an NBA game, right? So there is a recognition that, both global, both different revenue streams, and thankfully Adam is probably one of the more kind of out there, future forward kind of commissioners. Jan Kees, it's interesting. You come at it from a European perspective, perhaps. I have seen a flood of stadiums built in, across Europe for soccer stadiums, and yet now we're hit with a pandemic as we've got, I think there was a new stadium in Netherlands someplace. Where is this all going?
Well, no, the stadiums are, of course, still empty. And they will remain to be so for quite some time. By the way, we didn't have a new stadium in the Netherlands. They're talking about it, but stadiums here are slowly getting up to the levels of the US. Nevertheless, that will take some time. We're definitely be a little bit behind you guys. Nevertheless, if you talk about what I do expect for the 20s. I think we should also look at who are these people and who are these new fans. That's Generation Z and Generation Alpha. Those guys are the screenagers. These people live, breathe, and eat tech. So technology will be the main difference in the coming few years. And that can be in all kind of ways, whether it's the blockchain, it's AR, have your HoloLens on. And I'm talking now a couple of years away. In Europe, we're not that far, but it will happen. That's one of the things, one of the trends, I think. Then what Mark already talked about, connectivity and digitization, that will be the second important one. And that will actually be one of the revenue streams in the new business models. It's not only sponsorships anymore. It's not only ticketing, but there will be two different additional trends actually, or additional revenue streams, connectivity, and the other is sportainment. Experiences in stadiums or wherever you go will be key. Again, the new generation has a very short attention span, only 8 seconds or so. So it means that you have to keep them entertained, and only sports itself probably won't be enough, I think. So gambling on site, real-time gambling could be one of those trends. It's data on players, so which you can see through augmented reality. It's these kind of new elements besides, of course, show. Yeah, we are in Holland, we still have marching band during halftime, and that's about it. But there's no experiences in stadiums. That will be one of the big changes, I think, and it will give rights holders and sports clubs extra revenues, and they need it actually to survive. Those are my main expectations, at least.
No, I think I concur. I've taken a number of young people to baseball games, and after about 2 innings, it's like, what else is there here, Dad? So you might not have to deal with some of those ramifications, given that. Although cricket's popular in Europe. So, Andrea.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting what everyone's saying. I actually, it's the first time I heard the term screenager. Am I the only person that hadn't heard of that? That's a fantastic term. I love it. And I also think that the theme of understanding what the experience is not necessarily sitting in a seat and watching the game full out. So I think that that's super interesting. So I'm going to start with Mark this time, so you have a minute to think. So what sports properties, experiences, athletes, innovations are custom made for this decade? And the thought that I was having when everyone was talking is, it's almost like what some people were really good at. I was thinking about running for office. We've just had elections in the United States. So it used to be like, you could do a stump speech, stand on the side of a train, pull into a little town, scream your head off for about 30, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, you know, the Gettysburg Address type thing, give a great speech, have people applaud, move on. And then it became people who could just be good on television. And then it became now people who are good at or bad at tweeting, you know, that you leapfrog. So what's the skill set? You were talking about mobile, you were talking about some skills that are, you know, developing experience. What's custom made for this next decade, Mark?
Well, I think media is something that we should really talk about beyond, you know, technology. Just bring it back to content. What we've seen, you know, just going back, let's say 10 years ago, we were looking at mobile and digital or web. This was pre iPad. You know, we were looking at any of these experiences to drive broadcast. You know, Twitter was very good at that, you know, early days. And you know, we're fast forwarding, and you know, we've seen the rise and fall of kind of citizen journalism and what that means. And those companies have kind of been acquired and brought into larger organizations like Warner Media. And we've also seen the rise of the athlete. And it's not a new thing during the pandemic. It already existed before. And the concept that we are getting closer and closer to the story. And I think when you transition that into what we've seen out of esports and specifically Twitch, and the relationship that the creator has with their audience, not just to monetize them directly through the Twitch platform, but also to engage with them and have that audience create that experience with them. And I'm not talking about, you know, this upstart football league where you call your own plays that has come out recently. That's a whole other thing. But I think, I mean, what we could put some words on it. We can call it like the participation age, where that distance that we have between our idols. And when I say idols, I mean heroes, players on the field, players on the ice, on the court, what have you. Bridging that gap and bringing fans closer to those people, I think that is what's going to dramatically change, mostly because of all the things we're talking about. We expect there to be an adjustment in the media business. We expect there to be adjustment overall in the sports business. And so relying on a paycheck from one sports organization or one sport for an athlete, you know, isn't enough. We've seen, and it just seems like every week there's an announcement of athletes that are part of a venture fund, and they're trying to take their money and be part of that next generation. They're not leaving it for, I would say, the first generation, whether that was, you know, people like Ted Leonsis, for example, and the launch of Monumental Sports, and there's several others who have done the same thing, those owners who have taken advantage of owning the team to use that as a petri dish or a sandbox to experiment and build other businesses. Now we see that athletes are just as powerful, if not more powerful. And quite frankly, they're also 30, 40 years younger than these people. And you don't need $1 billion anymore. You can put in $15, $20, $100,000 and have a meaningful role in something that will change the face of sport. So I think that is the exciting part, where the athletes themselves are so much more than just, you know, the gladiators in the ring. I'll kind of leave it at that, because that might take us in a whole other
think it's
direction.
great. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about like Cameo, where you can just hire a quote famous person to say happy birthday to someone, or but awesome, you feel this sense of but you feel the sense of intimacy with an athlete now. You feel that you are in a relationship with them versus seeing them from afar on a field. That's partly camera vantage point, but it's also, as you were saying, that, you know, that the immediacy of the medium is pretty interesting. And then of course, you know, everybody's in these SPACs and the investment ways of getting involved. And I think that, quite frankly, that's really interesting, because it does empower the individual athlete in a way that's almost entrepreneurial. So very interesting. So Rob, thoughts about this?
Yeah, I'm going to actually yes and what Mark said and take it to the next level in terms of everyone is going to become a multi-tool creator if you want to be successful. So everyone needs to think of themselves as a brand as well as a media company. This is anything from the athletes to the agencies to the teams and leagues, everyone, because now what we previously saw is, oh, there's only ESPN doing in-studio stuff and these people have a platform. No. Everybody now has a platform to do it. So I even think about the way that I've grown my own brand. And someone once said to me, Rob, if you ever hope to get paid to do what you love, you better be doing it already. So what did I do? I taught myself Photoshop, audio, video editing, social media marketing, events, apparel, everything that you can think of. Well, let's fast forward it right now. And it's like, well, where are things going to go? As I look at athlete marketing, Players like Juju Smith-Schuster stand out to me. Why? Because he's got a YouTube channel. He's on Twitch streaming with Drake and Ninja, and he's multi-platform. It's no longer just waiting for a Gatorade sponsorship. All of a sudden, you're going to build your own brand. And then we're seeing sort of the evolution of media companies or the decline of them. And what's really happening now is the rise of a creator, the accessibility. And you showed the fantasy footballers. I love them. I listen to their podcast. I've met them. I've kicked it with them. They're fantastic, but they are a perfect example of what's possible, where you can take something that you love and say, all right, let's do it in live streaming form, podcast form, video form. Let's be on all social media platforms. And that essentially is they've turned themselves and their passion around fantasy sports into a media company. And it's always blown my mind when I look at companies and agencies who have no problem spending money. But then when I look at their content and I'm like, why do you not have a YouTube channel? Why do you not live stream? Why do you not have a podcast? If I'm going to be giving my money or attention to someone, I want to know that they can do the things that get down like the way that we all consume right now.
Well, I love the fact that in a way, and I'm going to use this term that might not be the right, I don't want to put a word in your mouth, but it's kind of democratized. These tools that people can do. Yes, there's a pro level of being able to do podcasting the way you can, Rob. But as you said, you put a microphone in front of someone, they can get better and better at it. So I love what you said. I mean, that's really memorable that you don't have to wait for the Gatorade sponsorship anymore. You can be proactive, take the tools into your own hands, create your own brand, and have a different shift in the power. I mean, it's not the sponsors and the owners that have 100% of the power anymore. The individual athletes and their ability to harness these tools. And that's a big shift, actually. Anything you want to add to that? Did I hear you right?
100%. So the barrier to entry is zero, because guess how much it cost me to learn all those things? Nothing. All you need is one thing: action. All you have to do is take consistent action, rinse and repeat, because relationships aren't built overnight. So if you're going to build a community and an audience, and this is probably the number one thing that I believe is an issue for the entire industry, that we can all talk about how we want to build communities, but here's the fact of the matter. And Mark, you actually identified this when you say you need to be willing to build relationships, but maybe it's not the most ROI in this given moment. Well, how many companies out there are going to say, well, you know what? If it's not the right ROI for us at this given moment, we're just not going to invest in it. So instead, the people and companies and brands that are willing to invest today, knowing the long-term nature and the power of building a community, anyone can do it. For me, I went all in and said, listen, this is my dreams. I'm never giving up. I'm never stopping. So for me, I'm never going to stop. But the majority of the industry, they're going to tell you why they can't. But I want everyone to say why you can.
I feel like I'm going to sign up for whatever you're selling. This is exciting, Rob. Thank you. Yes,
Please,
I'm going to say
the hot cold now.
Yes, right. Exactly. I really love that.
Before we go to Yankees, just for a second, I just want to kind of put some words around what Rob was saying there. And yeah, I'm buying whatever Rob's selling too, by the way. So Rob, very quickly, and Yankees, you can expand on this, please. I think it's about embracing a culture of experimentation and not residing ourselves to everything has got to work, or you're going to lose your job. And let's face it, in sports, there is a lot of leading with fear that comes into this. And so it's much easier said than done, as I say, to embrace a culture of experimentation, much harder to do.
It's great. And it's actually a transition from a conversation we had last week or last podcast, actually, with someone from Cisco who was saying, we know that this year is going to be, forget it. Like, no metric is going to be hit. So what a great time to just know that that's true, put a pin in the year and just try some stuff that you've been eager to do. And it's great that in sports, people are doing that. And I'm excited about it. Yankees, what is your thought about the future? What is the next decade going to look like in your opinion?
Well, just to give a short answer on the question, what I think will be important, and that's a different avenue than the other two are just they were talking about connectivity, but what can you do actually to make the fan happy going forward? Well, that's all about tailor-made experience. I think, and that is something which we will see a lot going forward in the future. There's a difference between a diehard fan, for example, and a casual fan. The diehard fan wants to have statistics. He wants to have all the information at his second screen, etc., etc. Casual fan wants to have, besides the game, fun and entertainment. He wants to see with his augmented reality glasses those dragons flying through the sky, or making a picture with his favorite player. There's a whole lot more. Those are different fans. Those will have different experiences. So I do expect that certainly with all the data, stadiums will become data temples. They will know exactly what their clients want, or what the average fan want, and not only the average fan, what the particular fan, what do you want, and not what do all the fans want. So much more tailor-made. So the possibility to choose your own camera angle, or your own content. I expect in the future that if you talk about media, that, for example, it will become much easier to produce your own content. The younger generation is very much into short experience, short, snappy movies, videos. They can produce that themselves, like we are producing podcasts that will come in the future, will happen much more than right now, because it will become a lot cheaper. So you get live media broadcasts from, say, the Twitters of this world, but that will be in video formats as well.
So I have one quick thing, because you don't have to think about it now, but we love examples, specific examples of someone that you've got your eye on in terms of a cool technology, not because you're being sponsored by them, but a cool technology, something that you see is really appealing to the screenagers, so not this round, but maybe by the end of their conversation today, it would be really interesting to hear a specific. So Sean, next questions.
Yeah, and I did like what Jan Kees had to say about, I think we are seeing a separation of the hardcore fan versus the casual fan. I think the hardcore fan's getting more hardcore with things like gambling and fantasy sports. Like, you worry about that relief pitcher that's coming in for the Diamondbacks at 12 midnight when you're on the East Coast. And then conversely, the casual fan, I'll take hockey as an example. PK Subban might not be the top 150th hockey player. And yet, if you look at any kind of media statistic or social media kind of statistic, he's married to Lindsey Vonn. He's dynamic. He's interesting. He happens to be a Black Canadian as well, which is rare in hockey. He's probably the most sought after athlete. And so there may be this separation as well between athletes and teams. All right, we got a couple more questions here, guys. More hardcore on the technology here. So I showed this list of 30 technologies we've looked at. Are there different types of technologies that you go, yeah, you know what, we may deny it now, but AI, VR, whatever you want to insert in here are going to play a pivotal role and will be more core, or will surprise us over the next few years than we think. So Jan, I think we'll let you go on this one. What's the one technology that you look at and go, yeah, marry that with that sport and we've got a winner?
Well, I think augmented reality is definitely the big one. Again, if we just talked about diehard fan, the diehard fan can point with his eyes to a certain player, get the statistics he wants. The casual fan can look around and see, for example, the flying dragon I just mentioned. He can basically do that. How you call that? Well, basically, you can augment. You get augmented reality everywhere in the stadium, whether it is in the stands or in the back, etc. I think that will be a big one. Blockchain ticketing will probably become a much more commonplace than it is right now, and much easier. A much easier way and a less fraudulent way to get into the stadium. And then I think maybe, but that's further away, maybe holograms. Holograms are kind of interesting. I don't know how soon that will be, but yeah, in theory, you could even, and if we talk pandemic, that has a relationship to it. In the far future, you could probably see in your own stadium, whether it be at home or in a stadium in your own city, for example, a game which is played at that moment at a different part in the world. You see the same game happening with holograms, and then you have the stadium experiences with other people. That's I think a little bit further away than 10 years, but it could surprise us. You never know.
Well, it's funny. We just had the Houston Texans and New Jersey Devils on. They were avowed that over the next decade, that very thing, hologramic telecast, would happen over the next decade. So we'll see. We'll see. The people on the inside are betting on it, though. So, Rob,
I didn't even listen in. So,
Rob, I'll pivot to you, and I know you're at least a somewhat kind of casual baseball fan, if not hardcore. Like, when do we get umpires that can tell balls and strikes? Just tell me that. All right, is that going to be happening soon?
I hope not.
What?
And here is why. Because we're going to have two different camps. Those that want absolute, and one of my answers actually to your question was going to be, let's call it laser technology that allows you to know when a goal is scored. It blows my mind. I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm a Penguins fan. I also live in Chicago, so I root for the Blackhawks. That we can watch a hockey game and you see the puck about to go over, and then all of a sudden the goalie's glove goes over it, and they're like, oh, we just have no idea if that's a goal or not. I'm like, well, wait a second. We can put a man on the moon, and you can't tell me if a football crosses the goal line just by putting a simple laser technology. Do that for any sport. Relating to the umpire side
Rob,
of things,
I got to jump in on that one because people don't remember this, and please tell me someone in this webcast does. Early 1980s, Buffalo Sabres. When there was a goal scored, the Maalox ad in the corner started to light up like a strobe light. And nobody I know remembers this, but I go, that was the coolest. Why doesn't the stadium interact with like that automatic laser that goes across the line, right?
well, because on one standpoint, we want absolute certainty. Like, we shouldn't have this failability in hockey and football where you're like, you know what, we just didn't get the right camera angle. How is there not a chip on the field in the ball or puck? On the flip side, you mentioned that about baseball. I do believe human error is part of games. So if you think about the relatability of sports, when we're growing up as a kid playing basketball, football, soccer, hockey, whatever it is, we're not sitting there with robot umpires. Why is it that we all of a sudden get to the pros and it's like, yeah, we've got robots? I wouldn't want the same thing for the NBA. I think that it's cool to have a human element as umpires, but in certain instances, I am cool with the laser technology, but I don't need it for balls and strikes.
All right. I thought I was agreeing and buying everything you were saying until then, because they apparently get 19% of their calls wrong. I don't need that much of a human mistake.
I mean, it's understandable, but for me, I would just call it misplaced focus. I don't really care about the umpires. If it were to change, so be it. But I really would prefer to focus on all the good things happening. But I'm with you. 19%, if all of a sudden there's robot umpires, so be it.
There we go. Got you on my side. Mark, technology. Have we not explored one that you might have, given the time you've had to think?
Yeah, well, listen, there's one I'll pick up on and a couple others I might touch on. First of all, I'll say, the Budweiser red light, and maybe it's the Canadian in me, but that was awesome. That was having that light go up in your
I don't know if it's global. Do you want to just explain what the red light is?
Sure. You buy a case of beer. It's kind of a Canadian thing to do, although it's Bud, so we know it's watered down slightly. Anyway, I digress. It's not Labatt, right? And so you buy a case of beer. It's a red light that you see like in old school hockey arena, and you put on your TV, your coffee table, what have you, and you connect it to your favorite team. And when they score a goal, the red light goes off in your home.
It's great.
It hasn't been copied in the States. Anyway, we'll move off that. So that's great. And then I'll touch on AR and VR quickly, and I'll say that the reason why we're not seeing more of that during the pandemic is because teams hadn't figured it out. They hadn't made the investments. And I'll talk about the technology and product part of it for a minute, which is, the platforms are super expensive historically to be able to bring that into a team app or a club app or even a league app. And so I know there's emerging technology. I won't plug the company because I am a little bit helping them, but there is technology in the content management side of AR in particular that will allow for this to be a lot easier. And we could talk about that if there's time. And a lot of minor league clubs are using it. But in VR, and my own podcast, the Backstage Project podcast, I had recently on a woman who's lifetime storyteller, a leader in VR, most specifically in the magic space of all places. And she recently had a Magicians in VR event, a completely virtual magic show in VR. And so I know the dominant use case in sports has been, you're sitting courtside and you have that immersive experience. But the truth is there's so many ways to replace that experience that allow you to multitask. But what if the experience is just existing in VR, period? There is no camera that's shooting it. It's actually being rendered. And this is where companies like Microsoft, I know, have made inroads to be able to create that. So I'm thinking about brand new experiences that will participate in VR because they are native to VR. They're not a 2D experience that we're trying to bring into a VR experience. And the last part that I'll touch on, there's a company called SportLogic, another Canadian company. They actually work with every NHL team and all the broadcasters. So they're capturing about 5,000 data points a second using computer vision and, of course, AI that underpins that. And the data that they have, and they're just looking for a better use case for it. By the way, CEO of the company and founder is a former Canadian Olympic figure skater, of all things. And so what they're looking for is to be able to use the live real-time data and produce predictive analytics so what's about to happen. And I think that's the part, forget about the coaching aspect of that and the fan part of that, but that's where the gambling part just comes into focus, where they got the data that's going to tell you what might happen based on the lineups, the matchup, the results that they've seen in the game already. And so they're big in hockey. They're also big in soccer. They're getting into the NFL, into football. Very interesting technology. It's still rather early in their days. And I think Mark Cuban was one of their earliest investors. So we know how he rolls.
We do. Andrew, you get the last big question. You got a choice of two different ones. You got esports. You want to talk about that? You want to talk about how much change, so how much recognition, or just a catch-all? Which question do you want? Because
so I have a pie chart question for each person. So it's a pie chart. So imagining that the fan experience today is made up of, I don't know, 3 elements. And then we look and kind of jump to 10 years from now, those 3 elements. It could be 2. What is going to be in the pie chart in 10 years that's literally not even on the radar screen right now? Anybody can go for that. I'm going to look at Mark because he gave a big smile. So, pie chart, even the descriptors, right? So I don't know what we think it is made up of. So what's going to be new in the pie chart that is going to happen in, within the next 10 years?
Net new? I don't know. You'll be the judge of that, Andrea, but certainly experience is going to have a different definition and what that means. And it could be a melding of physical, and not just in the venue, but physical outside of the venue, as well as broadcast. And so let's take that. Let's isolate that over here. I also think, and we're going to call it D2C because there's no other word that I can use to describe it, but putting the fan closer to the transaction, facilitated. I'm going to say facilitated by the league, and I'll let you bucket it into a slice of the pie. But I think the biggest difference that we're going to see, and I talked a little bit about SportLogic and what they're doing and what they haven't been able to do, but we've seen an arms race with data and insights on the player side and performance side, and every club, and their data scientists, and that needs to be democratized, because right now it doesn't make any sense for teams to hire PhDs when really it goes back to who's looking at those insights and then who's putting those insights into action to change performance. And I say the other part, and we've seen some of this already. I think the NBA bubble gave us a great glimpse into this. The investment that leagues and owners are making in these athletes, well, they're going to want more visibility into 24/7 lives of these athletes. And we're talking about sleeping. We've heard a lot about that, beyond nutrition and exercise, because it's more about making that athlete have their peak performance and creating the environment for that rather than hoping it emerges because of serendipity. And I will reference it because no one else has. You know, The Last Dance, learning about Michael Jordan, specifically his comeback and the second three-peat, and when he was filming, you know, he was filming you're gonna have to help me here, Sean, with the name of the movie again. But he was filming in California, and they set up a court by the studio that he was practicing with the greatest players of the time to prepare himself. And that kind of dedication and focus is something that I think more players are going to have to be accountable for, especially if they want to command these big salaries still.
I think that's interesting, and I won't go into it, but I'm always interested in which industry you think is going to be borrowed from, right? So it may or may not be the sports leagues or the owners.
I think it's retail. Like, I think if we can apply a term, and you're asking me the question, so I'm just making this up as I go, but we'll call it kind of like just in time, where you're going to be able to follow the product from the manufacturing floor right through to the customer.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, Jan Kees, this is our tough question, but it's actually an easy one if you want to take it that way. If you have a pie chart today of all the stuff that we think of as fan experience, and then you close your eyes and you picture one in 10 years, what's on that new pie chart that we're not even thinking about?
Well, we are thinking about it already, but it will then have evolved. I think the main one is probably real-time in-game betting. And Mark already elaborated a little bit on it, that the technology will be there. And it is part of the experience into the stadium for the diehard fan, but also for the casual fan. And it's also answering the need for fans to also make decisions, because we didn't really talk about that. The younger generation wants to be involved, wants to make its own choices, wants to make its own decisions, whether it's the team kit or the logo or whatever. That of course will all be included. But in betting, all of these elements are more or less coming together.
Great. So we'll round it out with Rob. What's your thought about what's going to be on the pie chart in 10 years?
Well, great minds think alike, because my answer was live betting. And really, if we want to actually go one step above that, let's call it game within the game. Live betting is a way to have the game within the game. And one of the things that I'm seeing in the sports betting industry right now is, how are brands able to speak to sports bettors and make it more accessible? I think one of the biggest challenges in the industry right now is how are they going to speak sports betting? Because as a sports bettor, if a brand is generic and is like, who's going to win the big game, it's not going to resonate with me. You need this personalization where they get down like we get down, speak that language. So if they're talking about parlays, teasers, -110, juice, like all, speak the language of the sports bettor. So we also talked about sort of the biggest opportunity is actually going to be the casual fan. The diehards like me are always going to be there. But how do we take someone who plays fantasy football but doesn't sports bet? And the simple analogy that I like to give is, you would say, all right, well, Tom Brady is playing the Jets and his over-under is 250 yards passing. You're like, Tom Brady's going to kill the Jets. Cool. Congratulations. Now you can understand sports betting. But from a brand standpoint, what you're going to see is a lot of free-to-play engagements, because we can use the mechanism of sports betting to create free-to-play games or engagements that says, listen, today let's have a bingo card. You get bingo amongst these player props or live betting things, you win X. So it would really be about using live betting as a vehicle for fan engagement to create that positive brand interaction for either the sports betting operators, the sports betting publishers, or the brands themselves that say, listen, you like this. I mean, the Budweiser example is fantastic, Mark. I love that. So maybe there was an extension right there for Budweiser. And oh, by the way, the movie you're referencing was Space Jam.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Or it could even be betting with your friend on a own made kind of bet. So I'm betting on Usain Bolt in this race will run the 100 meters in say 9.5 seconds, and the other is 9.52. So you make up your own bets, and the technology for that will be there then as well. Another one.
And this travels quickly. You got three smart guys around the table and woman, four of us, I guess, five of us, and it goes quickly. We're at the hour. We'll usually do something at the end called Around the Horn. Give us your best 15 words, guys. What have you learned, and what does the future of sports technology innovation look like? But 15 words, got to be quick. Rob, you were on a roll. Why don't you start us?
Exciting, growth mindset, personalized, community building, action oriented, no excuses. Those that are going to succeed are going to make it happen. Those that make excuses are going to fail.
Very good and very pithy. Thank you, sir. Mark.
Oh, how do I match that? Listen, for me, it's all about power is in the hands of the fan, and content is still king.
Alrighty, good. You have two more words. Any?
I got nothing left. I got nothing.
We've learned Space Jam, so that'll never be a slur again. So
mid-40s, that happens.
Young K's 15 words.
Okay, technology, I would say Gen Z and Gen Alpha, exciting, digitization, experiences and content. That's not 15, but close to it.
That's good. We need the time. So Andrea, pivot to you, and then we'll do some housekeeping.
Oh no, I'm good with Round the Horn. I learned Screenager, so I'm super happy. I feel I'm super excited every time we have a webcast. I learn something new. So I'm excited about the future actually, because it's very similar to other industries. I look at entertainment, as Mark was saying, retail. I mean, basically every single industry can learn from what sports is doing, and I think sports is probably going to do it faster.
The one thing I do pivot to, I'll throw one overall thing. The power of the athlete probably increases in the future, and the leagues and the teams probably go down based on what I've heard from all of our panelists. Like if you can build this thing, like Rob has just said, Juju Smith is going to be much more important than the owner of the Steelers in the future, it would appear. But I want to thank all of our esteemed panelists. This is our second of three, and man, like this was a lot of insight for 1 square hour. So thank you all three of you guys. We are exploring this a little bit further over the next 3 months. We're kind of doing Digiball, the foresight intelligence venture, and kind of answering the 50 questions we always wanted answered about this subject. So my hope is our three panelists today will be involved somehow by hook or by crook on our little odyssey. We do have another webcast on this. This is about how we play sports in the future. Will be happening at 3, and we'll be airing all these episodes next week in time for our weekly email. Myself and Andrew are launching our own book, so we're off virtually to Asia next week to launch something called Futureproofing Next that brings together all these different categories and innovation. And our next webcast, our normal webcast, is about the customer, and we cover off the 20 biggest customer trends that are happening about the customer, much different this year than last. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Andrea, once again.
Thank you.
And I will, because we're running late, I will just say we will see you in the future.
Bye-bye.